I've got you now.
Have you got me?
Yep. Sorted. Problem solved.
Oh my God. How did you do that?
I have absolutely no friggin' idea, to be honest. I pressed
Don't ask questions.
and it started working.
Hey.
I believe it's magic.
That's pretty much how it started working when I saw your face too. I was like, magic! So
Let's call it technomancy and be done with it.
technomancy. I like that. Technomancy. Two Girls, One Garbage Can, the podcast where we try and make sense of the garbage can state of Australian politics by examining what came before and what has led us to where we are. I'm your host, Tamara.
I'm Matty Mohawk, also known as the Garbage Can.
You are not the garbage can. You are the girls. You are the girls. The political system is the garbage can. We are the girls, and we are discussing the garbage can state of the political system. And I apologise because I misled you. I told you. What did I tell you we were going to be talking about today, Matty?
You told me we were going to be talking about the Tampa incident, I believe.
I did.
But I'm definitely interested to see where this is going.
I wanted to discuss an incident that happened in Australia, incident known as the Night of the Long Prawn.
The Night of the Long Prawn sounds like the worst porno name that you could ever come up with. Like, genuinely, that is the kind of thing that you would watch drunk with mates to laugh at.
Mate,
and
get ready, get
I
drunk.
am deeply fascinated to see what's happening. Let's fucking go.
Let's do it. The fact that it's known as the Night of the Long Prawn as well, can I just say, like, there is nothing more Aussie than naming a conspiracy or a scandal. Like, not the Night of the Long Knives, like, not the the Night of the Long fucking Prawn.
Could a country that has a monument called the Big Banana ever be any different? Like, genuinely. We are the like.
No wonder they don't think we're real. No wonder they think we're a NASA conspiracy.
Absolutely. We are the most fake country to ever exist. Aside from New Zealand, where they still have Hobbiton built.
They do. They actually had to rebuild Hobbiton. They dismantled it and rebuilt it.
Yeah.
Now, this happened during the time of the Whitlam government. How much do you know about the Whitlam government?
Bits and pieces. I'm going to be honest with you.
Yep.
For some really stupid reason, I am a much more full bottle on the history of American politics than I am Australian politics, which
not at all.
shits me to no end.
That is what we were taught in high school in Australia. We did a lot of American politics. Mm-hmm. We did the Cold War. So a lot of the stuff that I've learned about Australian politics, I learned at university. I really don't want anyone at all ever watching this podcast or listening to us to ever feel like they should know what we're talking about or that there's something that they're missing. This is the kind of stuff we were never taught that we should have been taught. So I really don't want anyone listening to this and being like, oh, I didn't know about this. I can't believe, like, nobody knows about this shit because we don't talk about it. And we should. Mm-hmm. We really should, which is why we are.
Excellent.
Yes.
Educate me, oh educator.
Exactly. I'm here to educate. So the Whitlam government, one of the things that people sort of know the most about the Whitlam government is that there was a coup on Australian soil. And a lot of people think that Whitlam wanted to kick the US out of Pine Gap. He didn't. He just wanted access to the information they were collecting. Whitlam's big problem was that we were doing all this spying for America and we weren't allowed to get access to the information we were collecting. Mm-hmm. Let's set the scene, shall we? A little bit. It's the night of Tuesday, the 2nd of April, 1974. Some people are at the movies seeing The Exorcist, which has just come out recently. Others are at home watching This Day Tonight or listening to Alvin Stardust's My Coco Cachoo on the radio, which was the top hit at the time. But at Parliament House, a dramatic plot is unfolding.
I'm going to pause you there for just a second.
Okay.
I feel like I need to go and get my dice because this is increasingly sounding like the start of a D&D campaign.
At this point, Gough Whitlam's Labor government has been in power for about 18 months. So it's that time where the honeymoon period's wearing off. People are wanting to see the action that they were promised at the election paying off. But the government's having that issue of having the opposition not coming to the table. The opposition, the Liberal and National Country parties, are convinced the government's program is dangerous. And they are very, very confidently telling the Australian public this at every opportunity they get. They are spreading dissent as far and wide as they can. Prior to this situation as well, there have been a lot of different issues with people having access to housing. This was a pretty tumultuous time for the Australian government. There were a lot of different programs that Labor wanted to try and pass. There were a lot of big promises that had been made at that election. So they wanted to pass national health insurance and electoral reform, which were the big ones. And these were, others were not fans of these particular ones. They need a majority in the Senate to be able to pass these reforms. They don't have one. So the opposition, the Liberal and National Country parties, are convinced that the government's program is dangerous. This is going to blow out government spending, and it's also going to weaken the hold on democracy. To be honest, the Liberal Party say this, but they know what it's really going to do. What it's really going to do is put a lot of power back in the hands of the workers. Labor Party they've made a lot of progress in the last few decades for workers' rights, and every step that they take towards empowering workers is money, control, power out of the hands of the elite, who the Liberal Party represent and have done since the very, very beginning. Now, Reg the Toe Cutter Withers, the tough opposition leader in the Senate.
What a fucking nickname.
The Toe Cutter.
The Toe Cutter.
Like, he has to physically cut someone's toe to get that nickname, right?
Why?
I'm just going to call him the Toe Cutter every single time. Reg the Toe Cutter Withers. I can't not refer to him as Toe Cutter Withers. But he had referred to the 72 election result as temporary insanity, and that the opposition were willing to go to great lengths to stifle the Whitlam government's agenda, and that they were acting on behalf of the Australian people when they were doing so, because the Australian people didn't really want the Labor government, even though they'd elected them. They didn't really know what they wanted.
No, of course not.
But Reg the Toe Cutter Withers, he does. He's looking out for us.
Yeah, very much a case of you don't know what you want, we'll tell you what you want.
Yeah. The dangerous, terrifying policies that Labor were trying to push through, that Reggie the Toe Cutter Withers was so gung-ho trying to warn us against, as I mentioned, were national health insurance and electoral reform. Terrible, terrible. So they need a majority in the Senate to do so. They don't have one. The opposition has the majority in the Senate, and they have no intention of passing the bills. So what's Whitlam to do? What is a poor little Whitlam to do? Well, Whitlam has a friend in Queensland known as Vince Gare. There has been some schisms and things happening which have led to this situation. Okay, there's been a lot of tension that's happening. Labor has split several times. He's got a lot of, but he's not got any real pull with anyone. He's a bit of an asshole. So Gare is 73 years old. So Gare is on his way out. You've literally been around since before the 1900s were a thing. Like, go away. We're done with you now. He was the former Premier of Queensland. He had been in the Labor Party during the divisive split over communism in the 50s and had stayed with the Labor Party despite being one of the more progressive members. So he was sort of already on the back foot with a lot of his colleagues. He was already halfway out the door before the DLP split happened. The DLP breakaway had been a thorn in Labor's side ever since, and he was its long-time leader. And so Whitlam decides, let's not tolerate him anymore. He's recently been removed as the leader of the DLP, and when they removed him as leader of the DLP, Gare is reported as having announced, well, fuck this, you can all go to buggery.
I hope we never change.
Yeah.
Like, That is what is remembered of this man being removed from leadership is, well, fuck this, they can all go to buggery.
Yeah.
That's the quote. That's the soundbite.
That's the quote. Yeah.
Love it.
So he only passed away in 1980,
Oh,
predates
damn.
us by, not even a decade. I know. So throughout his time, he had worked physically on the railway before, like, going to become a railway clerk, and like he came up through labour as a labourer. So,
Yep.
not the way it's done these days.
No.
No.
Not at all.
No, not at all. His parents, he was the 8th child of John Alexander Gare, a prison warden from Scotland, and his wife, Catherine Mary, who was a nurse from Ireland. So he had Irish ancestry. And that's important because the way that Whitlam decided to get him out of office was to appoint him as the ambassador to Ireland. That was how he was going to remove him from his seat.
Right. Yep.
His mother had become prominent in local politics as a supporter of the fledgling Labor Party, and young Vince often accompanied her to political meetings. So he had been taught politics at his mother's Irish nest. He joined the Australian Labor Party, held branch office, and served as a campaign director and state and local government elections. He also, in 1941, lost a daughter to epilepsy. His daughter was epileptic and she had a fit and passed away in 1941. So this is a person who's done the rounds. Like, he's reached the end of his life. He's in his 70s. He's put in the yards and he's being put out to pasture very unceremoniously.
Yep.
In January 1948, Gare had actually been he was the one who had introduced a 40-hour work week for the majority of workers in Queensland as the Premier. That had been his policy that he'd pushed over the line. But unfortunately, during the meat workers and railmen's strike in 1948, he had urged a confrontational strategy against the militant unionists in Cabinet and supported declarations of a state emergency. In negotiations with employers and the unions, he was really good at one thing, and that was the Labor minister that he had appointed at the time, Hanlon, had held a senior office at a trade union, whereas Gare had come up through the railmen's worker. So he had been a railman and he'd come up through that way. So he'd been a labourer and come up through the labourers, but he'd never worked through the trade union itself. So when it came to the negotiation tactics, he didn't have the diplomacy necessarily for it. He was a little bit more of a hardliner, and he did that thing that a lot of people do when they get into power, positions of wealth and power, where they become a little bit more conservative when it serves them too. So despite the fact that he'd introduced the 40-hour work week, when the railman strike in 1948 happened, he urged the Cabinet to declare a national emergency because, of the Cold War. And so, and so managed to use that in a way to try and quash the railman strike. Gare was quite electorally popular, and part of that had to do with a lot of the policies that he had pushed through for the workers. This was the other thing as well. Gare had really struggled to hold on to his seat in government through quite a few of these different schisms. So in 1957, he'd been summoned to appear before the QCE to show cause as to why he should not be expelled to the party for failing to give effect to the conference resolution. So this was a guy who'd been holding on to his position within the party for 30 years already. They'd already been trying to get him out for a long time. A lot of this had come about because of government's involvement in the Vietnam War. So the DLP had a much more hawkish policy. They wanted to get in and get out. They were not interested in hanging around in there. While they supported the idea of going in, don't know why, because the communists had all left, that's why. The ones who had brains could tell it was a bad idea. They weren't there anymore. So Australia's involvement in the Vietnam War assisted Gare in advocating for the DLP's policy on forward defence, which included the acquisition of nuclear weapons. So he was like, let's go big. Let's just go big, go hard, get in, get out. They reached the peak of their influence in the 70s when a 5th senator was elected, but from that point forward, they started to go into decline. The senator was Jack Kane, and he was in New South Wales. And this was the first kind of real support that they had in the south of the country. But from that point forward, the party starts going into decline. Despite his reputation as a skillful and tenacious campaigner, he performed poorly at the 72 election. The DLP strategist had severely misread the room of the public and had been claiming that a Labor victory would open up the floodgates of pornography and pollute Australian society.
Sounds dope.
Yeah. That seems to be what people were going for. We're talking the early 70s. Everyone's like...
It sounds like a fun time.
Yeah. And I've heard this mull they've been talking about. Can Labor get us some of that too? I've heard that's
Yeah.
doing good stuff overseas. I don't know. Like, good times all round.
Something about jazz? I don't know.
Yeah. Someone's telling me about some funny juice. It's just all good. But the problem as well with this was that Gare had a reputation for earthy humour and coarse language, much like yours truly. So he wasn't really seen as a credible advocate for such a campaign. Can you imagine me trying to tell people that the Labor Party was going to bring porn in and how dangerous that was for our society? Do you think anyone would take me fucking seriously for 2 seconds? I can't even say it with a straight face. Holy shit. While the DLP had managed to retain its position in the Senate during this rather awful campaign, Gare had lost a lot of credibility with his colleagues. His colleagues became embarrassed by his aggressiveness and heavy drinking, which started becoming a problem even in the House, which remind you of any modern day politicians?
Oh, yeah. Not a long history of that at all, Barnaby.
No. Yeah, literally. Photos of him passed out in whatever, all good. No, it's not. Yeah, so this, unfortunately, his problems were compounded as he was constantly criticising the Liberal leader, Sir Bill Snedden, who he alleged was incapable of leading so much as a flock of homing pigeons.
Solid roast.
Yeah. His criticisms of the opposition were not appreciated. Don't know why.
So the dude with the most criticisable surname ever.
Yeah.
Sir Snedden.
Sir Snedden. I went to school with a kid named Snedden, and we called him Sneds. That was his nickname. You can't ignore that surname. It becomes their entire personality.
Mm-hmm.
So in January of 73, Gare told the DLP federal executive that he intended to stand down, but delayed until finally giving in to the pressure from his colleagues. He resigned as leader of the DLP on the 10th of October 1973 and declared that he would retire when his Senate term expired in 76. Because he, at this point, had lost a lot of faith with his colleagues, lost a lot of faith with the public, in order to improve Labor's chances of winning an additional Queensland seat in the Senate, Whitlam recommended Gare for his appointment as ambassador to the Republic of Eire, or to Ireland. This was a bit of that appointment where Gare was like, didn't really have a choice but to take it. There was nowhere else for him to go. There was nothing else for him to do. But again, like with his delaying his resignation, he's like, I'll do that. I will do that. And then he just dragged his feet. And his dragging of his feet is what leads to Whitlam losing his head, basically. This is the night of the long prawn.
Hey, my little lovely trash pandas. Just pausing here to jump in and give you a little bit of background information. So for those of you who aren't from around these parts, every 3 years in Australia, we have an election, and during this election, while the entire House of Representatives is up for re-election, in the Senate, only half of the seats are usually up for re-election, which means half of every state's Senate seats are up for re-election every 3 years. Back in the day, if a senator resigned before their term expired, it was up to the Parliament of their state to appoint a replacement up until the next election. In April of 1974, an election for the Senate was upcoming in about a month's time, and Whitlam, who was an expert in constitutional law at that time, had come up with this plan to use the upcoming election to his advantage. Whitlam believes that if Gare were to resign before this election, then Labor would have a really strong shot of winning his seat and thus gaining the majority it desperately needs in the Senate to get these bills through that the Liberal Party are just not coming to the floor with. As previously mentioned, Gare's seat was located in Queensland, and the government of Queensland is led by Premier Joe Bjelke-Petersen, who absolutely detests Whitlam. Bjelke-Petersen gets wind of this upcoming Gare appointment, figures what Whitlam's plan is, and springs into action to get the whole thing completely blown out of the water. Thus begins the night of the long prawn. Bjelke-Petersen is hoping that he can delay Gare's resignation until after he has had the Premier write the writs for the upcoming federal election. This will lead to 5 seats being up for election in the Senate and not the 6 that Whitlam is hoping for. Bjelke-Petersen, as Premier, gets to control the timing of the paperwork. So if all goes according to his plan, he will be able to appoint a new senator in Gare's place, one who is just as hostile to Whitlam and Labor as he is. There's just one issue. They have to prevent Gare from resigning before Queensland's governor can issue the writs. So we flash forward to Tuesday evening and the stage is set. Enter Senator Ron Mounsell. Mounsell is a National Country Party member and, like Gare, he's a Queenslander. Bjelke Petersen has told him to distract Gare from going to the President of the Senate's office to submit his resignation. And Mounsell is hoping that he's going to end up with Gare's job if he fulfills Bjelke Petersen's request.
Because he wants his job, he has agreed to Mounsell. I've forgotten how to pronounce it now. We've been off topic too long. So Mounsell's been tapped on the shoulder by Petersen to distract Gare so that Gare can't go resign. He's doing it with whiskey and prawns.
Yep.
Meanwhile, in Brisbane, Petersen is pushing a complex administrative process through quickly and secretly. It isn't usually something that gets rushed, so it's quite difficult to do. Back in Canberra, everything is going to plan as far as Whitlam's concerned. But then a spanner in the works. The division bells go off. There's a vote in the Senate chamber. And with the numbers so finely balanced, everyone's needed. Gare could take this opportunity to resign. Mounsell decides to chaperone Gare in and out of the chamber. The two men leave Mounsell's office and go to the chamber to vote. Mounsell never leads Gare's side. Labor senators are totally unaware of what's happening, and as far as Whitlam knows, his plan is working perfectly. But it's not over yet, and they've all just taken their foot off the brake going, yeah, he'll get onto it eventually. Like, we know he dawdles, but eventually he'll go and resign. Like, it's not like someone's stalking him, making sure he doesn't, right? So in Brisbane, Petersen's actually tearing his hair out. Like he's the only one who's, well, Mounsell's aware, but Mounsell's sitting back having prawns and beer, whiskey. He knows as long as he sits and has a good time and possibly gets Gale completely fucked off of his face. Yeah, sorry, completely fucked off his face. His job well done. Petersen is the only one who's aware that there is a ticking clock. In order to get the writs official, they need to be affixed with the governor's official seal. The seal is inside a safe at Government House, and there's only one person with a key, and he's at home in Sandgate. The Premier, who's lost all patience, demands that they send a cab to Sandgate for the key. He's trying to keep a lid on this thing, so he doesn't want to let everybody know how much he's panicking. But he's fucking panicking. So in the first ever Ubering, just send an Uber for the fucking dress moment, he sends an Uber for the fucking key. Finally, at 1:20 a.m. on Wednesday, the 3rd of April, an exhausted Petersen tells his parliament that the deed is done. The writs have been issued for 5 Senate positions. Down south, in the chilly darkness of an autumn Canberra night, Gare and Mounsell pack up and leave Parliament House at 3 a.m. The plan has succeeded. Gare's resignation has been delayed and he's none the wiser. There will only be 5 Senate positions up for election and Whitlam won't get his way.
Wow.
Or will he? Whitlam's plan may have been foiled, but he's got an ace up his sleeve. The Senate has blocked legislation often enough to warrant a double dissolution, which means that he can double the amount of seats that will be up for grabs, and this will also include Gare's. Now, we know how the double dissolution went down. We know how that ends. On the 1st of April 1974, an embittered Gare was appointed ambassador by his erstwhile political enemies and was expelled from the DLP.
Jesus.
So they were like, you're fired. Congratulations on your new job. You're fired.
We got you this sweet retirement, President. It's a job in a whole other country. Now fuck off.
Fuck off. We don't want you here.
Buy your own plane ticket, by the way.
Out, Janiqua. Yeah, buy your own fucking plane ticket. Sort yourself out. Oh, God almighty. So.
Wow.
Yeah. Anyone who wants to say that these guys aren't fucking toddlers too, like the guys who are running our political offices.
Right.
Yeah. Fucking toddlers, the whole lot of them.
My God.
God almighty, I know. The ensuing storm of protest provided a pretext for the coalition and the DLP to try and block supply in the Senate. Whitlam then countered this by obtaining a double dissolution. At the polls on the 18th of May, the government was returned and all 4 remaining DLP senators were defeated. During all of this political furore, while all this was going on, Gare left on the 2nd of May to take up his appointment, which proved to be an unmitigated disaster. The feisty ex-senator was very ill-suited to diplomacy. He refused officials' advice, antagonised the Department of Foreign Affairs, the Irish Department of Foreign Affairs, and fellow heads of state. He addressed the British ambassador as "you old bugger." His inappropriate behaviour led to the resignation of many female members of staff.
Oy.
Yeah. Nothing sus. He
Nope.
persisted in making public comments on Australian domestic politics all constantly while in the media in Ireland. Everyone's like, you're fucking in Ireland, fuck off and shut up. And he would not shut the fuck up. The coalition was finally provoked when he repeated his criticisms of Snedden. Andrew Peacock, Minister for Foreign Affairs in the new Malcolm Fraser administration, recalled him on the 21st of January 76. In an angry response, he rhetorically asked if this was the thanks that he got for having kept the Liberals in power.
Holy shit. This guy sounds like simultaneously the best and worst person to have a beer with. Someone should put bars on the front door so that you can't enter polite society, Grandad.
Yeah. I just can't believe he's like, is this the thanks I get for keeping you guys in power?
That is unreal levels of sass for the 70s, man. Like, that's the sort of shit you'd hear from someone today.
Yeah. When I read that, I was just like, I need to know more about this man.
That's
'Cause he's
unbelievable.
Yeah. So,
Again, thank you so much for joining us for this week's dive into the depths of the trash fire that is Australian politics. If you've enjoyed what you've seen, make sure to drop us a follow, do all the usual engagement things, and help us get the word out there. You can find Tamara and myself on the social media links in the description below. But for now, it's garbage day, so the girls got to take the trash out. Bye.
see ya. So I keep forgetting that the months are sometimes important because I'm like, it was a little while later he actually did stand down, but he was like, yeah, I'm going to stand down, and then he just fucking took his sweet ass time about it.